Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we will be getting back into the book of Judges, and if you are unfamiliar with what we're doing here, I hold some unconventional beliefs. It's not for everybody. I try to recommend that people start in Genesis, and today is definitely one of those days that you do not want to just jump in if you are unprepared. I'm almost certain that I'm going to step on some toes today. That being said, we're going to jump into Judges 9 because we left off in Judges 8. We are doing a reading of the Bible from one end to the other, and we're just seeing what it says. And some of what it says is not what we thought it said, or what I thought it said, and so I talk about that. Let's talk about that. Now, if you remember, Jerubbaal is Gideon. He was named that because he contested with Baal. He just didn't do it out in public. He had to be outed because he was a little bit scared of the returns of what was going to happen if he stood for his God. And so he did it in the middle of the night, and then he wasn't very bold about anything. He was a man of valor, but he wasn't bold about anything. Everything he did was shady. And so this is his son. Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to his mother's brothers, his uncles, at Shechem, and said to them and to all the clans of his mother, "Please ask all the leaders of Shechem, is it better for you that 70 men, all the sons of Jerubbaal, rule over you, or just one man? Remember that I am your own flesh and blood." And when his mother's brothers spoke all these words about him in the presence of all the leaders of Shechem, their hearts were inclined to follow Abimelech, and they said, "He is our brother." So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, with which Abimelech hired some worthless and reckless men to follow him. And he went to his father's house in Ophrah, and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, survived, because he hid himself. And then all the leaders of Shechem and Beth Megillah gathered beside the oak at the pillar of Shechem, and proceeded to make Abimelech their king. All right, so where are we talking about? What's the location? Let's look at the geography real quick. This is the land of Israel. All of these blue dots, and I just moved one. Which one did I just move? Oh, that was Mounty Ball's up here, right? No, Mounty Ball's down here. That was brilliant. Sorry. Technical difficulties. All of these little blue dots, why? Why did you do that? I wasn't grabbing there. I was grabbing way up here. Define what is supposed to be controlled according to the book of Joshua. Now, we came to find out that this area down here was indeed not under their control, but they control all of this, right? Control it. And then this coastline here, with the one exception of this one blue dot, does not belong to them. And it wrapped around and it came down this way. Oh. And this whole section right here, with the possible exception of these two spots right here, seemed to be under the control of the Canaanites up until the last book. And then right now, they have not driven out all of the people in this land. Right? Where we are talking about right now, and I'm going to put this back where it goes, over here, is Shechem. And Shechem, as far as I can determine, is right here at Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. The oak where they divine things appears to be right here. The tabernacle is still housed over at Gilgal, the best that I can understand, which is the hill of foreskins, and where the conquest of the land began, well, if you don't count the land that was already taken to the east of the Jordan. But this is the land that we're talking about when we're talking about Shechem, is where the promise and the curse are literally cast in stone on these mountains. These people see these stones every single day. They know the lore because they are told all the time, right? If you live in the town, you for sure know the lore of the town. Especially back then, There wasn't a TV. There was no tablets to get distracted by. Nobody was wandering around on their phone. You talk to people about the things that happen in your town. That was a pretty significant happening in your town. Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal was a big deal. Half of the tribes was on this side, half was on this side, and they pronounced the curses and blessings. And this place, above all places, should remember the covenant. But what happens? Gideon, we're going to put aside what we talked about with Gideon and how he was such a man of valor, but he was successful and he had 70 kids. And you would think that because he was successful as a representative of the Lord, that maybe more than 2 of his children would get through the mix. But no. What happens is that he goes to all of the people, supposedly, like we don't know exactly how many people he talked to, but it says that, and they give him money. So he goes and he hires these people, and these people come. Like, it's not the people who give him the money, the people who are in the armies, right? They could do it, but it's not them. They don't want the blood on their hands. And they give him the money to round up all of his siblings. And then he kills them all. On a single stone, he sacrifices them all. Now, obviously, this is not a representative of God. It's not even portrayed as one in this particular point. This is a man seizing power, and he's getting a curse cast upon him. But it's just funny that right here, the son of Gideon, who is one of God's warriors, right? This is one of God's people who fought and was successful. One of his sons is the one that does this. It's just weird. And this was Jotham's parable. Now, Jotham was the one that survived. He was the one that hid, the youngest son. And when this was reported to Jotham, he climbed to the top of Mount Gerizim and raised his voice and cried out, "Listen to me, O leaders of Shechem, and may God listen to you." One day the trees set out to anoint a king for themselves. They said to the olive tree, "Reign over us." But the olive tree replied, "Should I stop giving my oil that honors both God and man, and hold sway over the trees?" And then the trees came to the fig tree, "Come and reign over us." But the fig tree replied, "Should I stop giving my sweetness and my good fruit to hold sway over the trees?" And then the trees said to the grapevine, "Come and reign over us." But the grapevine replied, "Should I stop giving my wine that cheers both God and man?" That's interesting. "And hold sway over the trees." And finally, all the trees said to the thorn bush, "Come and reign over us." But the thorn bush replied, "If you are really anointing me as king over you, come and find refuge in my shade. But if not, may fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon." Now, if you have acted faithfully and honestly in making Abimelech king, if you have done well by Jerubbaal and his family, and if you have done to him as he deserves, for my father fought for you and risked his life to deliver you from the hand of Midian. But you have risen up against my father's house this day and killed his 70 sons on a single stone. And you have made Abimelech, the son of his maidservant, king over the leaders of Shechem, because he is your brother. If you have acted faithfully and honestly towards Jerubbaal and his house this day, then may you rejoice in Abimelech, and he in you. But if not, may fire come from Abimelech and consume the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, and may fire come from the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo to consume Abimelech. And then Jotham ran away, escaping to Beer, and he lived there for fear of his brother Abimelech. So he's pronouncing a curse on his brother, and rightly so. This man has just murdered almost every one of his siblings, right? The only ones that count. The females don't count. And then this is Israel. The females don't count unless they have magical powers. That's just how it works. And so he just murdered, literally, his whole family, rounded them up, put them on a stone, and took them out. We have talked a lot about entities and how they can lead you in the wrong direction, and making sacrifices to the wrong entities can lead to the wrong things, and how there are multiple entities, and not all of them fight for the same causes. And that seems like a pretty good entity to get wrapped up in, right? Now it's interesting that this is the place where they made their proclamations, right? They stood on these two mountains and they proclaimed, with the Levites in the middle right here. But there are holy places and there are holy places. Now Gilgal is a holy place. It is a place that is held holy for some reason by at least one of these entities. Hebron is one of these places that is held holy by at least one of these entities. They want possession of these specific places, and they don't move from there once they get it. And so I think also that this is one of those places, and that's one of the reasons why they had to go and take that immediately, because that's one of the first things they did was take this, right? After Jericho and after Ai, they went and secured this plot, which they say the same day, but there is no way possible. Like, God would literally have had to stand the earth still for a couple of days for them to be able to do that in a day. It just didn't happen that way. And so this is where they came. Now, we made the argument where maybe Jericho was really up here and Ai was really over here, and they went straight into here. That makes sense, but that's not what's recorded. This is one of those spots, though, that is important, right? This valley, this particular valley right here, for some reason is an energetic center, and so it is fought over desperately, and sacrifices are made here quite regularly. This is where Dinah was raped. Should not have said that, but this is where Dinah had the SA thing to happen to her, and her brothers came to avenge her. Was right here in this spot, same spot. In fact, the spot is named for that dude. And so, and then Jotham ran away, escaping to Beer. I'm not going to look up Beer, but and Abimelech had reigned for Israel for 3 years, and God sent a spirit of animosity between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, and caused them to treat Abimelech deceitfully, in order that the crime against the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come to justice, and their blood be avenged on their brother Abimelech, and on the leaders of Shechem, who had helped him murder his brothers. The leaders of Shechem set up an ambush against Abimelech on the hilltops, and they robbed all who passed by them on the road. And so this was reported to Abimelech. Now, this is his uncles, right? This is his mother, the maid. It's her brothers who he went to and got the funding to take his kingdom. And apparently he wasn't holding up his end of the deal, whatever the deal happened to be. And so they were like, all right, bet. These were not good people. Right? Obviously, if they're paying to have 70 people executed, they're not the best people. And so they did what they felt like they had to do. There's a whole lot of outlaws that get used by the will of God. And the leaders of Shechem set up an ambush against them, and they robbed all who passed, and it was reported to Abimelech. And meanwhile, Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and crossed into Shechem, and the leaders of Shechem put their confidence in him. And after they had gone out into the fields and gathered grapes from their vineyards and trodden them, they held a festival, and went into the house of their God, and they ate and drank, and they cursed Abimelech. And then Gaal, son of Ebed, said, Who is Abimelech? Who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal? Is not Zebul his officer? You are to serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. Why would we serve Abimelech? If only this people were under my authority, I would remove Abimelech, and I would say to him, Muster your army and come out. And so we have a guy's like, all right, well, who is this dude? Why are we following him? We don't have to listen to him. In fact, if he was here, I would take care of him. Now, you should be very careful when you're making boastful statements, because if you cannot back them up, sometimes they get called to task. And so when Zebul, the governor of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, he burned with anger. So he covertly sent messengers to Abimelech to say, Look, Gaal, son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem and are stirring up the city against you. Now then, tonight, you and the people with you are to come and lie in wait in the fields, and in the morning at sunrise get up and advance against the city. And when Gaal and his men come out against you, do to them whatever you are able. And so Abimelech and all his troops set out by night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. Now Gaal, son of Ebed, went out and stood at the entrance of the city gate, just as Abimelech and his men came out from their hiding places. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the mountains." But Zebul replied, "The shadows of the mountain look like men to you." And then Gaal spoke again, "Look, people are coming down from the center of the land, and one company is coming by way of the diviner's oak." "Where is your gloating now?" Zebul replied. You said, 'Who is Abimelech that we should serve him?' Are these not the people you ridicule? Go out now and fight them." And so Gaal went out before the leaders of Shechem and fought against Abimelech. But Abimelech pursued him, and Gaal fled before him. And many Shechemites fell wounded all the way to the entrance of the gate. But Abimelech stayed in Arumah, and Zebul drove Gaal and his brothers out of Shechem. The next day the people of Shechem went out into the fields, and this was reported to Abimelech. So he took his men, divided them into 3 companies, and lay wait in the field. And when he saw the people coming out of the city, he rose up against them and attacked them. And then Abimelech and the companies with him rushed forward and took their stand at the entrance to the city gate. And the other 2 companies rushed against all who were in the fields and struck them down. And that day Abimelech fought against the city until he had captured it and killed its people. And then he demolished the city and sowed it with salt. Well, that's interesting, right? What just happened here? An unrighteous king was being protested against by somebody with at least a little validation, right? And instead of God raising up this man to strike down this unjust king, instead he just gets routed. And not only gets routed, like he gets routed, runs back to the city, and then the mayor kicks him and all of his men out of the city. It's like, nope, we want no part of this. The mayor, or the governor, has sent word, in fact, that this rebellion was fomenting. He sent word to the authority that this is happening. Come and take care of this. And so Abimelech comes and he defeats Gaal, and Gaal retreats to the city and then is kicked out of the city, and then he destroys Gaal, right? And then he destroys Shechem. Because, reasons. Now, he's not a just king. I'm not trying to say that he was, but why? They did exactly what you would want them to do. If you were the ruler, this is what you would want them to do. He heard something was happening, and he cooperated fully with you. He didn't drive a tent peg into somebody's head after inviting them in to sleep. He didn't break down the walls and destroy someone's home, most likely with them in it, after promising them to let them live, right? He did what he was supposed to do. He reported it to the proper authorities, whether or not that was a just king or not. He did what he was supposed to do. And then the king comes and just lays waste to his town and salts the earth so nothing can grow there. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. And then, on hearing this, all the leaders in the tower of Shechem entered the interchamber of the temple of El-Berith. And when Abimelech was told that all the leaders in the tower of Shechem were gathered there, he and all his men went up to Mount Zalmon. And Abimelech took his axe in his hand and cut a branch from the trees, which he lifted on his shoulder, saying to his men, "Hurry, and do what you have seen me do." So each man cut his own branch and followed Abimelech. And then they piled the branches against the inner chamber and set it on fire above them, killing everyone in the tower of Shechem, about 1,000 men and women. This was not people in rebellion of him, right? He cooked them, Now, this goes back to the may the fire come and destroy you, right? That was up here, where the surviving son, Jotham, where's the if you've acted faithfully, there it is. But if not, may fire come from Abimelech and consume Shechem and Beth Millo. So, because of what their complicity, the entire city has to die. Because the people who are not even in the city were complicit, then the people in the tower have to be cooked. And not just them. Then Abimelech went to Thebez, encamped against it, and captured it. But there was a strong tower inside the city, and all the men, women, and leaders of the city fled there. Like we saw in Gideon how that became the habit because of the desert raids, right? Just like the Vikings in northern Europe caused the mounds to be built where they could lock themselves and their flocks inside. Well, they made these towers because of these raiders from the desert. And they fled there as they were like they would go there, they would lock themselves in, and eventually the people would get tired of trying to get them and go away. Not Abimelech. And they locked themselves in and went up to the roof of the tower. And when Abimelech came to attack the tower, he approached its entrance to set it on fire. But a woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head, crushing his skull. And he quickly called his armor-bearer, saying, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest they say of me, a woman killed him." Well, I mean, your dad didn't have a problem with a woman killing somebody. Your dad didn't have a problem with the tent peg. And so Abimelech's armor-bearer ran his sword through him, and he died. And then the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead. They all went home. And in this way, God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done to his father in murdering his 70 brothers. And God also brought wickedness upon the men of Shechem, back upon their own heads. And so the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. Again, you can attribute things to God which are not from God, right? Abimelech probably said that God gave him the throne, despite the fact that he took it through bloody deception, probably, right? Various leaders throughout history have said that God has told them that this is their thing to do. And I'm going to tell you now that if God is telling you to kill somebody, other than in a self-defense type of a situation, it is not God telling you that. God is never going to tell you to kill 70 of your brothers, or 7, or a single one. As a matter of fact, he got quite upset the first time it happened. So much so that he cursed the people to wander across the land. Now, everybody thinks that they have a justification. Everybody wants to believe that this bad thing that happened was because of this curse. That Abimelech was thrown apart because of this curse that was given by the surviving son. It's possible. I do not discount the possibility of God to do anything. But if it was God, it would have been quicker. Right? He wouldn't have had 3 years to disprove himself. If it would have been God fulfilling justice, it would have been immediate, because that's how God works. Now, there's God's timeline and there's our timeline, and they don't match up. But the circumstances, right? Like, this wasn't God acting. This wasn't Sodom and Gomorrah. This wasn't the parting of the Red Sea. This was not 200 men with lightning at their fingertips. This was an army doing army things because they were bad people doing bad people things. It started with bad people and it ended with bad people. And the whole, this part about kill me so they can't say a woman killed him, like, that's so messed up. Like, it's just the whole reinforcement of this idea that women are only good if they're useful, right? These women are possessions unless they're Esther, unless they're Deborah, unless they're driving a peg through somebody's head. unless they are giving birth through the miraculous intervention of an angel again and again. Unless they have this specific use, if they have magical powers and can call forth water from rocks or up from the ground and move it in its course, unless they have that point, then they're worthless. So much so that if a woman kills you in defense of her own life, it is better that your armor bearer kills you instead of letting it. It's just so not smart to me. But that is the civilization that they were in. Women were a completely secondary thing unless they served the purpose. Like this Ruth or Deborah or one of these women who had the power. Then it's fine to listen to them. It is absolutely fine to listen to Esther. But you don't let no regular woman talk in a temple. Now we're going to get a couple that we don't get a whole lot about, right? So, Tola. And after the time of Abimelech, a man of Issachar, Tola, son of Puah, the son of Dodo, rose up to save Israel, and he lived in Shamir, in the hill country of Ephraim. Tola judged Israel 23 years, and when he died, he was buried in Shamir. And Tola was followed by Jair, the Gileadite, who judged Israel 22 years. And he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys. And they had 30 towns in the land of Gilead, which to this day are called Havoth Jair. And when Jair died, he was buried in Kemen. And again the Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord. They served the Baals, the Ashtoreth, the god of Aram, Sidon, and Moab, and the gods of the Ammonites and Philistines. And thus they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. And so the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and Ammonites, who that very year harassed and oppressed the Israelites, and did so for 18 years to all the Israelites on the other side of the Jordan in Gilead, the land of the Amorites. So where they're talking about here is the first place that they came, right? They're talking about on this side of the Jordan, right? The east side of the Jordan, in this hill country that was the first places that they took. The Ammonites still live off in this direction, off and up towards Damascus, right? They have possession at least of this, but from what I could determine, they have most of this as well. But the Ammonites are over here, and they are raiding into Israel right here. That's what's being said right here. And the Ammonites also crossed the Jordan to fight against Judah, Benjamin, and the house of Ephraim. And Israel was in deep distress. So that is over here with these blue dots. I just moved. I'm going to have to not do this. I just moved Jerusalem and Gibeon. Like I'm trying to grab right there. But that's this area over here, right? Benjamin is just south of Jerusalem and just north of Hebron. So it's like right in this area. Like Jerusalem's a little bit farther over. I'm going to have to reset that. There's Jerusalem right there. All right. So there's Jerusalem. Here's Hebron. Benjamin is over here. And the Israelites cried out to the Lord, saying, We have sinned against you, for we have indeed forsaken our God and served the Baals. And the Lord replied, When the Egyptians, Amorites, Ammonites, Philistines, Sidonians, Amalekites, and Maonites oppressed you, and you cried out to me, did I not save you from their hands? I could argue no. Like, temporarily, yeah, but what's a temporary to the promised land? Like, they were promised a land they wouldn't have to fight for. They promised a land that God was going to give them with no battles. But you have forsaken me and served other gods, so I will no longer save you. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them save you in your time of trouble. We have sinned, the Israelites said to the Lord. Deal with us as you see fit, but please deliver us today. And so they put away the foreign gods from among them and served the Lord, and he could no longer bear the misery of Israel. Then the Ammonites were called to arms and camped in Gilead, And the Israelites assembled and camped at Mizpah. And the rulers of Gilead said to one another, whoever will launch the attack against the Ammonites will be the head of all who live in Gilead. And again, we're talking about up here, right? We're talking about this area up in here. Now, Jephthah the Gilead was a mighty man of valor. He was the son of a prostitute, and Gilead was his father. And Gilead's wife bore him sons, who grew up and drove Jephthah out, and said to him, you shall have no inheritance in our father's house, because you are the son of another woman. And so Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where worthless men gathered around him and traveled with him. And some time later, when the Ammonites fought against Israel and made war with them, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. Come, they said, be our commander, so that we can fight against the Ammonites. And Jephthah replied to the elders of Gilead, did you not hate me and expel me from my father's house? Why then have you come to me now when you are in distress? And they answered Jephthah, this is why we turn to you now, that you may go with us to fight the Ammonites and become a leader over all of us who live in Gilead. But Jephthah asked them, if you take me back to fight the Ammonites and the Lord gives them to me, will I really be your leader? And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, the Lord is our witness if we do not do as you say. And so Jephthah went with the leaders of Gilead, and the people made him their leader and commander. And Jephthah repeated all his terms in the presence of the Lord at Mizpah. And then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, saying, what do you have against me that you have come to fight against my land? And before we get into that discussion, let's talk about this, right? Now, Jephthah the Gileadite was a man of valor, a mighty man of valor, like the mighty men of old. What do you reckon that might mean? He's the son of a prostitute, and Gilead was his father. But do you think maybe he might be of a specific bloodline? It may have come from the prostitute, and it may have come from Gilead, but it appears that his other sons did not have whatever property it is that makes him a mighty man of valor. That probably has something to do with the bloodlines of the Anakim, or the Rephaim, or the ones over in Egypt, or whoever it happened to be. The giant blood, the ones who can do the mighty acts. And there are somehow these people who are set apart. And Gideon was one of them, despite the fact that Gideon was a coward to his bones. Gideon was a coward to his bones. That boy was so yellow, he saw everything in yellow. And so he had this bloodline that set him apart and called him out and made him able to do the thing that needed to be done. Jephthah has the same thing, despite the fact that he was kicked out. Right? He is an illegitimate child. He is not the son that is claimed. He is the son of a prostitute who hangs out with some bad dudes. That's a theme. And then they come to him and they're like, hey, we need you to come fight for us because you're this bad dude. Like, you're this guy. So what do you have against me? He sends to the king of the Ammonites, and he's like, hey, what do you have against me? And the king of the Ammonites says, when Israel came out of Egypt, they seized my land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, all the way to the Jordan. Well, now, therefore, restore it peacefully. And so we get into the topic of conquest once again. And here it's going to be addressed directly, so let's go ahead and read it, and then we'll talk about it. But Jephthah again sent his messengers to the king of the Ammonites to tell him, this is what Jephthah says. Israel did not take away the land of the Moab or of the Ammonites. But when Israel came up out of Egypt, they traveled through the wilderness to the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. And then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, please let us pass through your land. But the king of Edom would not listen. And they also sent messengers to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel stayed in Kadesh. And then Israel traveled through the wilderness and bypassed the lands of Edom and Moab. And they came to the east side of the land of Moab. We talked about that extensively. And camped on the other side of the Arnon. But they did not enter the territory of Moab, since the Arnon was on its border. And Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon, and said to him, "Please let us pass through your land into our own place." It was not your own place. It was not. It was somebody else's place. And they were very much right to deny you entry. They lost. No doubt about it. You conquered that land. But Sihon would not trust Israel to pass through his territory. And so he gathered all his people, encamped in Jahaz, and fought with Israel. Now remember, at this point, the story was 600,000 fighting men. It is an army of 600,000 coming to your borders and saying, "Hey, let me pass through, and I'm going to go over here and take this land. I'm not going to mess with yours. Just let me go through." Like, we are so open and honest and valorous on the field of battle that we would never, through subterfuge, after you had allowed us to pass through your lands, conquer you. That would never happen. We are very much an above board, fight on the field of battle type of people. So Sihon was very much justified in doing what he did. You cannot believe that. You can apologize for Israel by saying that it was a promised land. But what I say to that is what I said to that yesterday. And that is, there was a man who wandered across with his sister running from his father's house. And he wandered through other people's lands and coveted it. And decided that God told him that this land was going to be his one day. And he brainwashed his children and his children's children and his children's children's children into believing that that was true. And these children's children's children went and took the land that this man decided to give himself from people who were living there peacefully. And they put them all to the sword. And you can choose to apologize for that. I will not. You can choose to serve the entity who said that. I will not. And then the Lord, the God of Israel, delivered Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, who defeated them. And so Israel took possession of all the land of the Amorites who inhabited that country, seizing all the land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. Now, since the Lord, the God of Israel, has driven out the Amorites from before his people Israel, should you now possess it? Do you not possess whatever your God Chemosh grants you? So also we possess whatever the Lord our God has granted us. Are you now so much better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever contend with Israel or fight against them? I don't know. Did Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, ever contend against them? I bet we've covered that. For 300 years, Israel has lived in Heshbon, Aurora, and their villages, as well as the cities along the banks of the Arnon. Why did you not take them back during that time? I have not sinned against you, but you have done me wrong by waging war against me. And may the Lord, your judge, or the judge, decide today between the Israelites and the Ammonites. But the king of the Ammonites paid no heed to the message Jephthah sent him. Well, that's because, okay, you want to play by the rules of conquest, then we're going to play by the rules of conquest, win or lose. Now, you can get into the argument about divine will. I'm not. This is very much saying that because we have conquered this land, this is our land. Well, okay then. Abide by that. Are you going to abide by that later? When Rome comes in and conquers the land, are you okay with that? Because they were there for a while, man. Rome was there for a good while. Were you okay with Rome just wandering in and taking it? How about Damascus? How about Lebanon? How about any of the various people who come in and conquer your land? Are you okay with that? Is it consistent for you to be okay with you taking land and not being okay with the land being taken. Because for me, I understand the rules of conquest, and I am actually even okay with them. If you can come and take my spot from me, then you deserve my spot. But I have the right to defend my spot. And if you do drive me from my spot, if I come back for my spot, that's just the beef until it's done. And then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, then through Mizpah of Gilead. And from there he advanced against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made this vow to the Lord: if indeed you will deliver the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to greet me on my triumphant return from the Ammonites will belong to the Lord, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. Bruh, are you kidding me? What did you... This is God's chosen. And this is what God's chosen is going to vow. The first thing that exits my house, I will burn in the name of God in order to ensure this victory today. So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord delivered them into his hand. And with a great blow he devastated 20 cities, from Aurora to the vicinity of Minnect, as far as Abel Keramim. And so the Ammonites were subdued before the Israelites. And when Jephthah returned home to Mizpah, there was his daughter coming out to meet him, with tambourines and dancing. She was his only child, and he had no son or daughter beside her. And as soon as Jephthah saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "No, not my daughter. You have brought me to my knees. You have brought great misery upon me, for I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot take it back." "My father," she replied, "you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you have said. For the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites." And she also said to her father, "Let me do this one thing. Let me wander for 2 months through the mountains with my friends and mourn my virginity." "Go," he said, and he sent her away for 2 months. And so she left with her friends and mourned her virginity upon the mountains. And after 2 months she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed. And she had never had relations with a man. And so it has become a custom in Israel that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to lament the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. So, what we have here is the entity has chosen its sacrifice. Once again, the entity has required the blood of the one who is to save. Not their blood directly, but the blood of their child. And you can look at that as the pattern going forward of Christ. But I look at that as, what the fuck? I know that just stepped on somebody's toes, but you're telling me that the first time this guy who just randomly decided that this is his land is told by this entity, go and sacrifice your child. And he does. He goes and he straps his kid to a stone block and he raises his knife. And another entity, a different entity, comes up and is like, whoa, stop. No. Use this ram instead. And so he does. He swaps it out and he doesn't kill his kid. But now this entity, whether it's the same one or not, we're not sure, right? There are multiple entities, but this one again is not a good one. Now, you can talk about the God of battle and how the battle and the conquest and the blood there is justified, right? They were acting in defense of the land that they have conquered, and by all means, that is their land. They have claimed it. They have lived there for a couple 100 years. And They consider it their land, just like the people that they drove out considered it their land. And so the fighting and the defense of your land, I get that. Like even taking it to them so that they can no longer return it to you. I get that. But, okay, so maybe, by the farthest stretch of the imagination, God actually chose this sacrifice for himself. The first thing to come out of the door of your house, what do you think it was going to be? Your wife? Your mother-in-law? Like, what did you think was going to walk out of the door? A cow? A goat? But God chose to send the daughter out. And she's like, all right, Pops. Sure thing. You can burn me up. But first, I ain't never been laid. Let me go cry about that in the mountains. Do you think that she went to cry about it in the mountains? We talk about controversial topics over here, and I don't shy away from them like some people do. And despite what you may believe, homosexuality was not the sin that got Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed. It was the forcing of the actions, and I'm not going to rehash that, but it was not unusual, right? We talked back in the laws about how they outlawed one type of homosexuality, but they were not very explicit about the other because it was not uncommon. If you had multiple wives and you, like, it's a thing. It happens. Like, it still happens today. People are living like that today. It is the very rare single person that could possibly pull that off. Finding two of them is a miracle. Finding three people who can peacefully coexist in a sexual relationship is like getting struck by a meteor while holding lightning in your hands. It is almost impossible to be happy in this situation. Not to say that it can't happen, but most of the time it leads to strife. But these relations are not as uncommon as people would like to think. And so when she went up to the mountains for 2 months, yeah, she never had sex with a man. But her and her homegirls went up there for 2 months. And I bet she had some experiences because she didn't just go up there and cry for 2 months about not having sex. That's what she did. Like, I'm going to be burnt to death in 2 months, but you know what? I'm just going to go cry about it. Or did she go have some experiences, even if, and I'm not saying like it had to exclude a man. We're just saying that they're saying excluded a man. And it became a custom in Israel that each year the young women go out for 4 days to lament the daughter. I bet the same thing's happening there. And we're going to wrap it up at after 12, so let's go ahead and burn through this. And then the men of Ephraim assembled and crossed the Jordan to Zaphon. And they said to Jephthah, why have you crossed over to fight the Ammonites without calling us to go with you? We will burn your house down with you inside. He has been successful. He has destroyed the Ammonites and took over their possessions. But Ephraim comes and is like, well, what are you doing? Well, that's interesting. Because Ephraim was getting raided, and so was Benjamin, and so was Judah. And now it's put a stop to it. But Jephthah replied, my people and I had serious conflict with the Ammonites, and when I called, you did not save me out of their hands. And when I saw that you would not save me, I risked my life and crossed over to the Ammonites, and the Lord delivered them to my hands. Why then have you come today to fight against me? And Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim, and the men of Gilead struck them down, because the Ephraimites had said, you Gileadites are fugitives in Ephraim, living in the territories of Ephraim and Manasseh. And the Gileadites captured the fords to the Jordan, leading to Ephraim. And whenever a fugitive from Ephraim would say, let me cross over, the Gileadites would ask him, are you an Ephraimite? If no, If he answered no, they told him, well, please say Shibboleth. And if they said Sibboleth, because they could not pronounce it correctly, they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. And so, at that time, 42,000 Ephraimites were killed. And Jephthah judged Israel for 6 years, and when he died, he was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. So, how about that Israel, huh? That wonderful unified state, or even that Republic of, right? Because it was not a unified state up until David. And even then it was very temporary. At best, they were a theological republic. They were based upon Yahweh and the law of the covenant, but they were 12 independent states acting as a republic, and these didn't agree with those, and so they fought. That happens a lot. They fight with each other as much as they fight with other peoples. And so, again, where is the promise of no fighting? Well, if you follow the Lord, the very first generation didn't. They could not have received the information. Like, I could understand if it was the second and the third generations who fall off, but it's not. It is immediate. And here, they're just killing people because they can't speak right. Seriously. Like, holding beef for 6 years. 42,000 people who are like, yeah, I'm going to go cross the river. They don't know that that everybody else that's doing it is dying. 42,000, like, good God. And after Jephthah, Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons as well as 30 daughters, whom he gave in marriage to men outside his clan. And for his sons he brought back 30 wives from elsewhere. And Ibzan judged Israel 7 years. And then Ibzan died, and he was buried in Bethlehem. And after Ibzan, Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel for 10 years. And then Elon the Zebulunite died, and he was buried in Ajalon in the land of Zebulun. And after Elon, Abdon of Hillel from Pirathon judged Israel, and he had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys. And he judged Israel 8 years. And then Abdon, son of Hillel, from Pirathon died, and he was buried at Pirathon in Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. And that's where we're going to start wrapping this one up for today, because I think we've had enough bloodshed for the day. And next we get into Samson, and that's a whole new story to talk about. What we see in this repeated pattern is that Israel is not ever a cohesive nation. Like, even in David, it is barely held together. By the time of Solomon, it is fairly cohesive, and then after Solomon, it is gone. And so we have a very loose republic who fights with themselves as much as anything. That is not what I was taught, right? I was told, read the Bible, but you're supposed to read it as though this is minor skirmishes that didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. This is a major conflict within the borders of the republic. There's a lot that I miss because I'm not some classically trained biblical scholar. I'm not somebody who went to seminary and went to college. I'm some random dude who read the book, who is reading the book, and what we see repeatedly is that the entity that they serve is not a good one. He requires constant war, conflict, and sacrifice. Not in a, give me this freely because I have been good to you and you want to freely give back to me. In a, you owe me blood. No, that is not God. I stand on that. And so God is right. God is true. God is light. God is love. And anything outside of that is not of him. If it is deceitful, if it is destructive, if it is all of the things that we continuously see Israel demonstrate. I don't enjoy this. Right? I have to do this because I've been told to do this by God. And no, it was not an angel that came down and said, you will go and do. Like, it is how God talks to me. I've discussed it before. I'm here on my own journey sharing it with you because I'm learning things from this. Like, I read through this and I pick up new things as I read through it again. I've read the Bible with the lenses on. Now I'm reading it with the lenses off. And it is two different stories that way. You can talk about the Ark of Redemption. You can talk about the fact that, well, God ordained that Israel go through these trials. God said he was going to give them the land, and that didn't happen. He said that they would live in peace, and that didn't happen. The entire history of Israel is conflict for the land. It is conquest and being conquered. That is the history of humanity. That is how the world turns. The grind is. We live in some relatively peaceful times. The very severe conflicts that we have going on are really quite minor in the grand scheme of what could be going on. What might even be coming upon. Get yourself right with God. Make sure you are serving the correct entity. All God has ever required from you, the only sacrifice ever required, is your sins. You are supposed to repent from them and go and do better from there. To turn your life to God. Say something like this: Dear Heavenly Father, I come to you as a sinner, and I ask you to forgive my sins, and I ask you to change my life to one that you would like to see, the one you designed for me. And if you said anything remotely resembling that, and you really meant it, then it's done. There's no bodily fluids ever required for the remission of your sin. You have never been required to sacrifice anything. No blood has ever been required for you to be saved from your sin. That's where I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat complicated topic. This is a long, bloody trail. Judges is not nice for me. I don't like doing this particular part. Joshua was okay because there was a lot to talk about in Joshua that was obviously glaringly, blaringly wrong. There's a lot in here that is obviously glaringly, blaringly wrong. But it's just a repeat of the same wrong stuff all the way through. Now, it gets a little bit better as we get into Chronicles and the things from there, but it doesn't really get to where I want to be talking about these things again until we get to David and Solomon and until we get to the actual prophets. Because I got a lot to say about the prophecies, and I've got a lot to say about the things that they deal with. And quite honestly, this history, this bloody history, while enlightening, is not the part I want to do. I could skip ahead, but I'm not. I'm going through it piece by piece, line by line, so nobody can say, well, you didn't do this. No, I did. I read through it, and it's terrible. I'm not serving the God of this sacrifice. I am not serving the God of this bloodshed. God said, go forth, be fruitful, multiply, and shed no blood of man. The whole law is love God and love your neighbors. Don't kill them. That's the whole law. And the whole story of Israel is going forth and killing them. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me. And I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit's Take. Peace.